Hey, what's up, my friends? Todd Falcone here. Welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to talk about building better rapport. I actually did a Facebook Live a few days ago and had a great conversation with a friend of mine, Chris Widener, who is, when I think about speakers or trainers, this guy is like really exceptional on the influence side of the equation, leadership and influence. And he and I had about a 45-minute chat around that subject matter. So, in fact, if you missed last week's episode, you'll find that there. So you can listen to the conversation that Chris and I had. It was specifically on the subject of influence. And since we talked about influence, I figured it might be good to do a specific follow-up on the subject of rapport building. So, okay, so I'm going to go in a few different directions. Like, honestly, like a rapport building lesson could be a 2-hour lesson. And it could be a very specific, in-depth 2-hour lesson. I want to keep it as simple but meaningful as possible so that you can take the information from this episode and go apply it into your business. In fact, I would encourage you to ask yourself, am I actually doing these things? So, it would be a good idea for you to watch this if you're catching me on video. Some of you guys are catching this on audio as a podcast. It'd be a good idea for you to have a notepad and pen, and maybe you can do a run through right now, and then come back and take notes, and then be able to look at those notes and apply them into your own life. Because here's the bottom line: like when it comes to selling, when it comes to doing business, when it comes to building any kind of meaningful relationship. And by the way, pretty much any business, I know most people that follow me are probably involved in direct selling and network marketing, but it doesn't matter what you sell. Literally, it could be anything, any service. It could be it literally, like, pretty much the whole world revolves around selling. People are selling something. Restaurants sell food, grocery stores sell groceries, insurance agents sell insurance, and so on. So, if we're going to get into an interaction, if we're going to get into an engagement with a person, if you think about it, and this is really important, you got to understand this. This is very basic, bare bones, simple, but you have to understand it, that people buy from those that they like and trust, okay? Bottom line, nobody really loves giving money to somebody that they don't dig. So if you have ill feelings about somebody or you don't trust somebody, you're probably unlikely to do business with them. In fact, many of you have probably had experiences in your life where you've done business with somebody one time, they didn't do you right, and you didn't do business with them again. On the other hand, somebody does you right, and they treat you well, and they treat you respectfully, and it was a fun experience. You're probably going to go back to them again and again and again. In fact, I'll just kind of digress, I guess, for a moment. There's an exercise that I've taught. I'm sure I've taught it on video here, but very simple exercise that I would encourage you to do. I actually do this in all of my A teams just to create a sense of awareness for people so that they can really see in front of their face, like, okay, well, what draws me in versus repels me? So here's a quick exercise. If you've heard it, might be worthy of doing it again. If you haven't heard it, then hey, it's definitely worthy of doing. So what you do is you take a piece of paper out and you draw a line through the center of the paper. At the top of the left-hand side of the paper, you put businesses and people I love, and on the top right, you put businesses and people I don't know, I guess I don't love, something like that, right? And then what you do is you put the specific names of companies, businesses that you love to go back to again and again and again, people that you can't wait to hang out with the next time, those names. And then on the other side, businesses, I'll never go back there, never again. No, I don't really care to hang out with that person. And then what you do is you write down why. Like, what are the words why? Like, why do you want to go back to that restaurant again and again and again? Why can you not wait to go see this group of friends again and again and again? What are the reasons? And then what's interesting is, and this is an exercise that you should do, because it'll literally just like, wow, okay, I want to be more like this and not like this. And you'll come up with these descriptive words, these things that these individuals or these businesses are representing, and you're going to be like, hey, I want to be more of that because that sounds, and obviously that's appealing, and I don't want to do that because that's not appealing at all. So, so take the time to do that exercise. That's I think that'll be generally powerful in helping you just to be, a person that is more, I guess for lack of a better term, attractive. Like people are attracted to you, they're drawn to you, they want to do business with you because of, generally speaking, how you make them feel. Right? And that's, if we look at, for example, the definition of charisma, the definition of charisma is a compelling attractiveness or charm. So it's not looks, it's, how we make people feel. So if you think about somebody who's incredibly charismatic, how would we describe that person? Well, they're great listeners. They're super nice to me. They care. They're just their attention is just so. If I'm talking to them, I feel like I've got all of their attention. They make me feel special. These are little things that make a big difference, right? It makes the biggest difference in terms of repeat business and people. First of all, people initially being drawn to you, and then people wanting to come back again and again and again. So, and I believe that. While there are certainly people that are just naturally charismatic, I believe that charisma can be taught. If you understand the definition of it and you understand why we perceive people as being charismatic, you can actually learn to be charismatic. And I'm not going to get into that here. I mean, some of what I'm actually talking about today is most certainly going to help you in that arena. But so specifically on rapport building, again, Milton Erickson, who was... he was actually a hypnotic language patterns guy. I remember his quote, like, in the presence of rapport, anything is possible. And in other words, if you don't have rapport, it's very difficult to do anything. And what is rapport? Rapport is essentially a feeling of trust and comfort and alignment with an individual one-to-one or even one-to-many. So I could be, for example, in rapport with an audience that I'm speaking for, and I could also be out of rapport with an audience that I'm speaking for, or a person, an individual. I could be both in or out of rapport. And if we we also look at something like this, like people generally like who they're like. Okay, so I'm going to give you a lot of likes here, right? People buy from those that they like and trust. And so if you can be more like another person, they're more likely to like you, right? And again, this isn't like, I know that if we're talking about business, it's not just, hey, I'm trying to go out and make a bunch of friends, I want to do some business here. But if you understand the premise of rapport, that it's all based on trust, and that in order for me to do business with you the first time, you got to feel comfortable with it. I mean, sometimes we do business with people that we're like, I don't know if I would really want to do this, but that's not something that generally people are going to repeat over and over again. So okay, so let's talk about a few different examples of how to get into rapport. Like, for example, eye contact, right? I'm sitting here and I'm looking at you. I know we're from afar, but I have direct eye contact with the lens and the camera. And so we've all heard the phrase, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Well, if we can be in direct eye contact with somebody, then that's going to make an impact versus the shifty person that can't ever look you straight in the eye. Most of us would think of that person as like, I don't know if I can trust that guy. He can't even look at me. And in fact, if you've ever met somebody like that, you probably said exactly that. I know I've heard that exact phrase from people who, I just can't trust a guy that can't look me in the eyes. So that's one thing, is giving good, solid eye contact with the person that you're communicating with. In fact, I remember Chris saying this in the conversation that we had the other day. This is actually a separate conversation than the one that's on my previous post from last week, but because we were talking about rapport building. And when you use somebody's name, Chris, like, hey, Chris, nice to meet you. That's like music to an individual's ears. It's hearing their own name, addressing somebody by their name. You can also overuse their name. It's like, oh, Chris, and then Chris. Well, that's cool, Chris, and Chris, and Chris, and Chris, and Chris, Chris. That can be overused. So you got to be careful. And one of the things that in rapport building, generally speaking, is that subtlety is critical. Because there's some other things that I'm going to get into here that you can do that are very, very powerful to help you build rapport, but you have to be incredibly subtle. Okay, you can't be painfully obvious. So, like for example, if I'm like, let's say, okay, I'm sitting here in my office. Let's say you're meeting a person for the very first time, and you're going to go into a meeting and you haven't met yet. Might be a good idea to understand, even for example, how this particular company or people in this company dress. Like, are they all in jeans and t-shirts, or khakis and a polo shirt, or are they a suit and tie group? And so, for me, if, for example, even when I speak, and this would be the kind of the same thing, I'm walking to a new audience and I'm speaking for a group of people. If I know it's a bunch of suit and ties, even though, if you guys have seen me speak before, I generally don't I mean, I haven't worn a tie for I can't remember how long. But I will, at the very least, I will put a suit on with a nice button-down shirt, nice shoes, because just me being similar to that audience, I'm going to be more in a state of rapport because they perceive me as like them. I'll give you a quick example. I was in Hawaii doing a multi-island tour, and I was there, and I know because, Hawaiians are, it's hot there, and they're wearing shorts and flip-flops and aloha shirts. So the first time I spoke on Oahu, I was in shorts and, flip-flops and an aloha shirt. And the CEO of that company showed up, and he was wearing a suit and tie. Now, I understand the CEO might think, oh, my gosh, I'm the CEO, I got to dress like that. But he was totally out of rapport with that audience. And when we did the next island, and he did it again, we went to the next island. He finally took his jacket and his tie off. By the time we got to the last island, he was wearing aloha shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. And it was crazy because you could feel the audience. They were like all stoked that he's like, oh yeah, brother, you're like us, right? It was like you could feel the energy, and he was definitely in a much better. I'm sure he was more comfortable, but he was in a much better state of rapport. So how you dress might make a difference. So I will think about before going into a meeting with somebody, what's the style of dress in this place that I'm going to. It's interesting because even like when you see friends, like generally friends are in rapport with one another. So if friends are in rapport with one another, they probably dress alike. They probably talk alike. I mean, like my kid, one of my kids, my 16-year-old is, he's a little skater dude, and all of he and his buddies, they wear these pants that are like 40-inch waists, which my kid's probably got a 28-inch waist, and they get these huge pants and they cinch them down with belts, and that's their style that they wear. So, and they put they sew on badges and stuff onto their pants, and all of the bros, all the kids that they hang with do the same thing. So, even when they come over to the house, it's like they all kind of got the same haircut. So it's interesting how people that, they tend, it's like the other phrase, like you become more like those you hang around. So if you hang around somebody, naturally you're going to pick up on things that people do. You might pick up on language patterns. Like if you're, for example, with a bunch of surf dudes, you might be like, yo, bro, big waves, dude. Yeah, that's awesome. Cowabunga. I mean, that's probably not really surf language, but you get my drift. So, so there's a number of things that you can do. So think about this, like how you dress, how you look, how you appear, walking into let's say you're walking into an office, observation is good. Looking up on the walls, is there a picture of their degree? Is there a picture in the background of this giant stuffed largemouth bass? Is there a picture of a person and their buddies at a golf tournament? Are there golf clubs shoved in the corner? It's like you can pick up on little things, and then what you can do is you can potentially use some of those things as icebreakers. You walk in and you see this huge, 15-pound largemouth bass hung up behind a guy, and you're like, dude, oh my gosh, wow, did you catch that? Yeah, I caught it. That's actually the biggest bass I ever caught, and they'll tell you the whole fishing story. And what's interesting is it takes the tension right out of the shoulders, and there's an immediate level of relaxation. It's like, that's why we call it an icebreaker, because it takes the frigidity away from that initial interaction with somebody, and it kind of warms up the conversation. That's where the term icebreakers comes from. So, but now here's the thing. You don't have to be a fisherman or a fisher person or a fisherwoman in order to comment on that. Now, I could comment on it and get into a more in-depth conversation because I'm a lifelong fisherman. So I could be like, okay, where did you catch that? Did you catch it on top water? Did you catch it on a plug? I mean, how was that? That's crazy. I can get into an actual conversation. I'm not saying you can't use it if you don't fish. You can still comment and go, holy smokes, and wow, that's amazing. And it's a way to begin a conversation with somebody. So that's super powerful. And then there's other things you have to really pick up on. Like if someone speaks really fast, if they're a fast talker, then you're going to want to speed up the speed at which you talk. If someone speaks slower, you're going to want to speak slower. If someone speaks in a higher volume, lower volume, lower volume. This is called matching and mirroring, okay? And then even gestures, like if I'm sitting with you and we're this, you're there and I'm here, and you lean forward like this and put your hand on your chin, I'm very likely going to lean forward and do something similar because I'm actually literally mirroring your body language. Now, the thing you have to be really careful with this is don't be too obvious because, in fact, I remember I was sitting with a woman one time, and she, I know, had studied NLP and understood this, but I don't think she understood that subtlety is critical. And she ends up kind of, I ended up leaning forward and she leaned forward. She was like literally doing like instantly exactly what I was doing, and I could catch it. And I think even though I'm trained in it, I caught it, but I think any person that even wasn't trained in it would probably catch it. So again, if you understand this, people buy from those that they like and trust. The more like someone we are, the more likely they're going to like us. So if we can be in some degree of similarity with those individuals, then it puts us in a good position to build trust, to build rapport, to create a degree of comfortableness, if that's a word, and they're more likely to want to do business with us. So, it could be and also the words that you use, like the specific language or the words that you use. You might be, for example, if I go in with a group of I don't know, of my surf buddies, I can go into surf language. I'm not going to be like, dude, what's up, bro? Like the waves are gnarly. I'm not going to do that because that's that's like a stereotypical, unrealistic example of what a surfer is. But I can totally talk in surf language, or I can talk in ski language, or if I'm with a group of people at church, I can speak in a manner that would be more reflective of that environment. So I think to some extent also you want to be a chameleon. And you want to be able to flex and flow and be able to go into different scenarios and be able to have some type of behavioral flexibility that's going to enable you to adapt to all these different situations. Like I've done a lot of business on the phone and called people that I don't know and that don't know me. We can call that a cold call. You can call it whatever you want. Calling leads, calling professionals, just calling people, right? And so if I've got data in front of me and I'm calling somebody that I don't know, I've got their name, their first name, their last name, their address, their city, the city that they live in, the state that they live in. I've got their email address. And I've got their phone number. So, for example, if I'm looking at a lead and I'm picking up the phone, I'm calling this person, and I want to do something to build rapport with an individual that I don't even know yet, I can look at it and go, wait a minute, this person, let's say it says Fishers, Indiana. Well, my brother lives in Fishers, Indiana. So if I saw that, I would immediately, as soon as I saw the city, it would immediately trigger a thought, oh, my brother lives there, which would actually give me an advantage from a rapport building standpoint. I'm like, hey, is John in? Yeah, this is John Todd Falcone, calling you from Bend, Oregon. Listen, you were on my website asking for some information about making money from home. Is that correct? He's like, well, it is. I'm like, hey, I see you live in Fishers, Indiana. My brother lives there. That's a cool town. I actually paid a visit with him last year and his family. We had a blast. We went to Carmel. And so it gives you a chance. You can look at different things that are in front of you. An email address. Sometimes people personalize their email address, like soccermomabc123 at whatever.com, and I can look at that email address, and that tells me that the woman that I'm calling, let's her name is Deborah, and it says soccermom whatever at whatever.com. Well, I could get, as I get into the conversation, I'm like, hey, I just noticed your email is, soccermom whatever at whatever.com. You have kids that play soccer? And she's like, oh, all of my kids play soccer. I'm like, that's awesome. I grew up playing soccer competitively for most of my life. And again, it's like one of those commonality things. Let me finish with this. It's kind of like this. Like if you're going out, if you're going out on a first date, for example, right? And you're getting ready to, you're having a conversation with somebody, you're communicating with them, and you're getting to know one another, and you're asking each other questions. Where are you from? I'm from Seattle. Where are you from? I'm from Alabama. Okay, cool. And where'd you go to college? And you go, oh, I went to Long Beach State. And they're like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, you went to Long Beach State? I went to Long Beach State. What? You're like, you went to Long Beach State? I'm like, yeah, when were you there? I started there in 85. I started there in 85. What are you talking about? What? And immediately it's like, now you're like immediately communicating on this thing that you have in common, and it makes the conversation so much easier versus, can you imagine, and we've probably all dealt with this, where you're communicating with somebody and you have nothing in common. The conversation oftentimes is quite awkward. It's not very comfortable. So, look, these are some concepts. These are some ideas to help you get better at building rapport. You need to be conscious of this and then be able to do it unconsciously, okay? So that, in other words, you don't have to think about it in order to do it. If you need to rewind this, if you need to go back and take notes, please do so. It's a very important subject and something you should be skillful at if you're involved in any type of selling, which you likely are if you're following me, and it's going to help you make more money. So if you're on my podcast, I appreciate you guys listening to me on audio. If you're on my YouTube channel, appreciate you guys as well. The rest of the details on this episode and other resources for you and helping you become successful in network marketing are right here at toddfalcone.com/episode 239. That's TODDFALCONE.com/episode 239. We'll see you next time.